What's going on, everybody? Tyler here, and first of all, hope everyone's doing well. It's been a minute since I've last posted a video for me personally outside of the Chips podcast. If you haven't checked that out, highly recommend. But now, NFL season's coming to a close. I'm not going to be previewing the Super Bowl. Tonight, February 6th, Saturday, February 6th, is NFL Honors, where they honor all the best players in the league. They make the Hall of Fame announcement, and they hand out a lot of awards. So tonight, or not tonight, really, right now, here at 9 o'clock in the morning, just sat down, I will be making my predictions for NFL Honors, at least the main awards, and then I'll be throwing in a couple awards of my own. So, without further ado, let's get it started. We'll start with the granddaddy of them all, partially because I think it's the most obvious award winner in this one, the MVP. I think without question, it's got to be Aaron Rodgers. Number 1 in the NFL in passing and completion percentage at 70.7%. Number 7 in passing yards with 42.99. The guys ahead of him, by the way, outside of Mahomes, did not have reliable running games. So Watson, Mahomes, Brady, Ryan, Josh Allen, and Justin Herbert were all ahead of Aaron Rodgers in that. Sean Watson really did not have a reliable running game in David Johnson. Patrick Mahomes had Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Not great for the entirety of the season, but good, solid. Brady, Ronald Jones, and Leonard Fournette were inconsistent. Matt Ryan, Todd Gurley did not live up to the hype. Josh Allen, there was no running backs at all. Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler was hurt a good chunk of the year. So then you got Aaron Rodgers, who had Aaron Jones, so they had to feed him a good amount of touches throughout the course of the season. And they also had Jamal Williams and A.J. Dillon, two other really solid backs. Rodgers was number 1 in passing touchdowns at 48. He had 7 games with 4 passing touchdowns. Number 1 in QBR with 84.3. Number 1 in quarterback rating at 121.5. And despite throwing so much, Rodgers was 19th in passes that were considered bad throws with 69. That I think it's very impressive. In my book, the fact that he was able to limit the bad throws and just make play after play after play and lead the Packers to an NFC Championship game appearance is very impressive. And they only had 5 interceptions, 2 of which coming in one game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers back in Week 6. After that point, Rodgers was throwing darts everywhere. Moving on to the Coach of the Year. This is a tough one, in my opinion. You have Sean McDermott for the Buffalo Bills, who the Bills well exceeded expectations. Like, everyone thought they were going to be good. They were going to win the division, the AFC East. But I don't think anyone thought they would be that good. Kevin Stefanski, obviously, in Cleveland, leading the Browns back to the playoffs with an 11-5 record. Those are the 2 main guys for me, and I'm ultimately going to go with Stefanski, partially because first-time head coach, he did the impossible, took the Browns back to the playoffs, and did it in a pretty convincing fashion. Yeah, the Browns were a wild card team, but they beat the Steelers in round 1, dominant. They nearly beat the Kansas City Chiefs if it wasn't for one fourth down conversion late in that game. And I think the Browns are really good. And they also did it for the most of the season without Odell Beckham Jr., arguably their best receiver on their team and a top 10 receiver in the NFL when healthy. So I'm very excited to see what this Browns team can do with a healthy Odell, with Baker Mayfield with all this confidence, Jarvis Landry still on the team, a 2-headed monster at running back in Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, a very solid offensive line, and a really solid defense. So the Browns, and Kevin Stefanski is the Coach of the Year, in my opinion, and rightfully deserves so. Next up, Offensive Rookie of the Year. So I know that Justin Herbert was named the Coke Zero Sugar Rookie of the Year, whatever it was, award a couple days ago, but I don't think he wins this. I think it's got to go to Justin Jefferson, partially because you heard Justin Herbert was thrown into the fire, per se, in the middle, 15 minutes before a game, but what Justin Jefferson was able to do as a wide receiver with no training camp, no offseason programs for rookies, I think it's hardest to succeed early in your career as a wide receiver because your chances are reliant on a slew of other factors. What's the coverage like on you? What are your opportunities? Who's your quarterback? Whereas the quarterback, you will get thrown into the fire most likely. Jefferson, he was able to thrive. He was the best receiver on the Vikings team and maybe top 7 this year overall. Pro Bowl as a rookie. Very hard to do. 15th in catches with 88. 4th in yards with 1,400. All the guys ahead of him, Diggs, Kelsey, and Hopkins, all had 105 or more catches. That's the thing. You knew what you were getting in guys like Diggs, Kelsey, Hopkins. So they were going to get their targets. They didn't know what Justin Jefferson is. He didn't have his breakout game until a couple weeks into the season. So the fact that Justin Jefferson was able to do so much, despite a slower start, is what all the more impressive. 9th in yards per reception to 15.9. Only 7 touchdowns, but that is dependent on a lot of things such as your situation and how you're guarded in the red zone and just what your team's overall philosophy is. Remember, the Vikings have Dalvin Cook, so a lot of times they didn't need to throw in the red zone. They could just hand it off to Dalvin Cook. And there's also Adam Thielen there and Kyle Rudolph, 2 big targets in the red zone that Kirk Cousins could throw to. 6th in yards per game with 87.5. Just overall, a really good rookie season, and I think he is destined for a good thing. I mean, when you're passing Randy Moss in rookie receiving records, that means you're doing something right because Randy Moss is a Hall of Famer. Just me. Moving on to the defensive rookie of the year, you got Chase Young. Not really because he came out and earned it, more so because the rest of the defensive rookies were not so great. But don't get me wrong, Young was really good. 44 total tackles as a defensive lineman, 10 tackles for loss, and 12 quarterback hits. So he's good at getting to the quarterback. 7.5 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries, and a touchdown. So an overall really balanced season. Do I think that he benefits from having a defensive line around him with Montez Sweat, Daron Payne, Jonathan Allen that's really solid and deserves their own attention? Yes. I think he benefited mightily from that. But as a rookie, once again, someone who didn't get the opportunity to have a rookie minicamp, all the rookie offseason work, he came out guns a-blazing basically and really performed at a high level for a Washington football team that made it to the playoffs. And he has a lot of swagger about him, which I think could be very good for him going forward. We saw him calling out Tom Brady and the Buccaneers in that playoffs. Offensive Player of the Year is the next award, and I think there's no doubt here. It's got to go to Derrick Henry. By far the best offensive player in football this year. I mean, he should be the MVP, probably, but usually that's a quarterback-driven award. And Rodgers, with the story and all, deserves it. But Derrick Henry was the best offensive player in all of football this year. I mean, come on. The guy became the 8th player in league history to rush for 2,000-plus yards and led the league in rushing for the second straight year. 126.7 yards per game and 17 touchdowns. Just unstoppable. I made the mistake of not taking Derrick Henry in both my fantasy football leagues. I took Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and then Derrick Henry was the very next pick. I regret that mightily, and I will admit that. That was a dumb move on me. I thought he could not do it again. He could not perform the way he did in 2020, that he did in 2019, because there's all that wear and tear. Now, Derrick Henry, I think, has cemented his spot as, if not the number one running back in the NFL, definitely top 3. You can make the case for Alvin Kamara. You can make the case for Christian McCaffrey when healthy. Dalvin Cook when healthy. Saquon Barkley, I don't think is there. I think he's just outside of that group. I think he's in that 1B group. Derrick Henry is there consistently, and he is the Offensive Player of the Year without question. Next up, Defensive Player of the Year. And we got a Watt, not JJ, TJ. 53 total tackles, 15 sacks, led the league in sacks. 23 tackles to loss, also first in the NFL. He just creates headaches for opposing coaches like his brother JJ, and he's really hard to stop. And remember, a lot of that production came later in the season when Bud Dupree went down, who is a pass rushing threat in his own right. So TJ, he was doing a lot of it with double teams. So I'm looking forward to seeing what TJ Watt can do going forward, because he is really, really good on that as an outside linebacker. I would actually like to see the Steelers move him to the inside to see what he can do every now and then. Not every down, because I think he's so good on the end. But maybe you disguise something. You pull him around and he goes up the middle, inside. That would just be also a good threat in the run game because he gets so much pressure pushing back opposing offensive linemen. They basically can't run that way because he's clogged up that lane. Next, Comeback Player of the Year. There is no question here. It's Alex Smith. I know everyone's been saying all year long, so I'm not going out on any limbs. But given what he had gone through with the leg, his life was near His life was threatened. He might not have came out from this. There was a very good chance of that. His career looked like he was done. And then he comes out. 6 starts, 8 total games played. 5-1 record. 67.7% completion percentage. 1,582 passing yards. 6 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. So not world beater stats. The fact that he's out there mainly was the reason for leading the Washington football team to the playoffs. With a team around him, by the way, that's not that good. Antonio Gibson was all right at times. Terry McLaurin did not have the best of seasons. He was still having a very good season. There's really no tight end. Logan Thomas emerged late. It was really a defensive team. So on the offense, I guess the offensive line is good. But still, Alex Smith to do what he did is phenomenal, I will say. And also, shout out to Ron Rivera, beating cancer throughout the season. He's another Coach of the Year candidate I didn't mention earlier. But he and Alex Smith, that is a pair. I don't think the Washington football team will stick with Alex Smith heading into next season. I think they maybe should give it a go, keep him on the roster at least, if they bring in a young guy, or they try to bring in a veteran. Remember, there's going to be a lot of quarterback movement this offseason. All right, now into the final 3 awards that are kind of like my own personal just for fun. I was going to think of more, but I didn't want to get too cheesy. First award, most surprising team. Got to be the Cleveland Browns. I know in my NFL predictions videos in my 32 straight days previewing the 32 NFL teams ahead of this season, I said the Cleveland Browns were going to be 11-5. I was right. So I guess they were not a surprise for me. But for the majority of the people, Browns were a surprise. Especially since they were so hyped going into 2019. They added Odell Beckham Jr., Baker Mayfield was coming off a phenomenal rookie season. Freddie Kitchens was the coach, and he was like the Baker Mayfield whisperer almost. They had that run game, yada, yada, yada. Browns ultimately did not live up to the hype. They didn't. And I think a lot of people toned down their expectations. I was not one of those people, fortunately. I almost got the record exactly right in terms of which games they won, which games they lost. But, hey, can't always be perfect. And overall, the Browns, I think, stated their claim that they could be a contender, making the playoffs for the first time in forever, getting their first win. Making the playoffs for the first time since, I believe, 2002, getting their first win since 1994, when Vinny Testaverde was their quarterback. Come on. I mean, hats off to that whole Browns organization. Remember, this is also a team, mind you, who is riddled with COVID. Of all the teams in the NFL that dealt with COVID the most, the Browns are up there with who had to deal with it the most. Ravens are up there. Titans are up there. What other teams are really up there? New England, kind of. But the Browns, I think, are one of the teams that were most heavily impacted by COVID-19, especially when it mattered the most late in the season, when they needed their players on the field to get into the playoffs. And remember, their coach missed the first playoff game against the Steelers. Kevin Stefanski missed the game because he was out with COVID. So, hats off to Cleveland. They did phenomenal this season, and I'm really excited to see what they can do with their whole team back in 2021. Now for the most disappointing team, and for me, that's got to be Atlanta. The Atlanta Falcons. For the second straight season, they have a losing record. They're going to be a top 10 team in the draft. With all the talent, I figured they would go 10-6. That's what I predicted. They could be fighting for a wild card spot. They ended up going 4-12. Worse than the Carolina Panthers, who I thought were going to be maybe the worst team in the NFC. And now have the 4th overall pick in the draft. Definitely time to think. I think they got to start rethinking that roster. Moving on from Matt Ryan. Probably moving on from Todd Gurley. Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones, I think you can keep. Maybe, I wouldn't be surprised if they traded Julio Jones. I don't think they should. Julio Jones is one of the best receivers in NFL history, in my opinion. I wouldn't be surprised if they did it. Just because they got to move on. And he's a big hit to their salary cap. So to move on from him, you can get a lot of assets. I wouldn't be surprised. But with that 4th overall pick, the Falcons have got to take someone who can make an impact. And I think that person is Justin Fields, a hometown kid from Georgia. Obviously, I know he transferred from Georgia to Ohio State, but that's partially because of the situation in Georgia at the quarterback position. I think if you bring him in, let him study behind Matt Ryan for half a season. Maybe you don't even have to. Just have him start and Matt Ryan teach. Justin Fields could be the future of the Atlanta Falcons and bring them back to the promised land and win that Super Bowl that Matt Ryan couldn't. Final award. I guess not award, but prediction. It's all the talk about the quarterback movement. We've already seen Jared Goff and Matt Stafford traded teams. Carson Wentz is rumored to be going to 9 different teams. There are talks about Aaron Rodgers possibly moving out of Green Bay. Don't think that should happen. Talk about Drew Brees retiring, Brady retiring. Not really. Ben Roethlisberger being out of Pittsburgh. The list goes on and on. Phillip Rivers is already retired. There's one player, though, who takes a cake in terms of quarterback movement, and that is Deshaun Watson. In Houston, the situation has gone from bad to worse in Houston. I don't think the Texans are going to try to trade him, but I think Watson will get to the point where they have to trade him, similar to James Harden in Houston. The Rockets said they didn't want to trade him. They were willing to get ugly. And then ultimately, James Harden basically forced their hand. Houston, I think Deshaun Watson will do the same thing. So where do I think Deshaun Watson will be going in 2021 and playing? The Jets were a big option. They got all those draft picks, and they got Sam Darnold they could trade. You got the Miami Dolphins. Similar to the Jets, they got all these draft picks. They could trade Tua Tagovailoa, and you could bring Deshaun Watson there. There's been talks that Deshaun Watson would prefer the Jets over the Dolphins. He does also have a no-trade clause, so that is a point of note. Indianapolis, they were talking about, I don't think Houston would trade him to an in-division foe. I think the team that Deshaun Watson plays for, and this is, I don't want to say going out on a limb, per se, but it's not getting talked about enough. I think it's New England. The New England Patriots, I think, will make a move for Deshaun Watson and bring him in. Bill Belichick is very savvy. He knows what he's doing. He's got assets he could trade. And I think he and Deshaun Watson could do very good things in terms of winning. And I think that entices Deshaun Watson because I know he wants to win. I don't know him personally, but just from what I've heard, I think he really wants to win. And why not go with arguably the best coach in the NFL? Sure, the Patriots don't have a lot of options at receiver. A lot of weapons on the offense. But they could rebuild. They could retool. Draft some guys. Sign some guys. Some veterans. And Deshaun Watson can do some things. And they also got an offensive line that's still solid. He won't get beat up as much as he did in Houston. But that's just me. Let me know what y'all think down below in the comment section. Who do you think wins all these NFL Honors Awards? Enjoy the program. Enjoy the Super Bowl. That's the other thing. Super Bowl. Tomorrow. I already made my prediction on the Chips podcast. Check that out below. I'll put the link there. But I said Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to win. It's Brady. Can't go against him. I don't want to pick him. But I think it's just Brady. He's too good. So that's my pick. But let me know your thoughts on Super Bowl. Who wins? MVP? NFL Honors Awards? NFL big moves, just overall. What are your thoughts in the NFL? The NFL did something impossible. They had a 2020-2021 season amid a pandemic. Hats off to them, I will say. Thank y'all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And see y'all next time. There's the stop. There it is.